Welcome to Maps and Meta-Analysis.
Looking at California cities. Hi, I'm Darvesh Borhead.
And I'm Justin Hurst, and this is Facts and Folsom.
A meta-analysis. Hey guys, this is episode 9 of Facts and Folsom. This week we're just going to be talking about transit, and so no city council things, anything like that. We just wanted to have like a more topic-specific episode because we're trying to work on getting some interviews for the future, and we wanted to spend a bit more time planning that out. So in lieu of that, we're basically focusing on a topic this week. So what are we focusing on?
So we're going to talk about transit, and given that you're kind of the expert here and you have the more, you have the stronger interest there, I would say also good experience relevant to it. I will just focus on asking Darvesh questions, and then Darvesh will be doing probably 90% of the talking in this episode.
Gotcha.
So I guess just starting, centering transit in the city of Folsom, what does Folsom currently offer for transit?
Yeah, so the main thing would be just car, obviously. So like you have just a personal automobile that you use to move around. There's obviously walking. There's bicycling. So there are a lot of bike lanes and trails and things like that where you can either walk or bike. And no like motor vehicles are specifically allowed on there. So even if you have a motorcycle like it fit in there, they're not technically allowed.
What about motorized scooters?
Actually, I've been seeing a lot more people with motorized scooters. I even saw someone in my neighborhood with a golf cart, but that seemed more like a novelty than like a practical application. Although I have been seeing more e-bikes, but I would still I don't know why. I guess I lump that in with bicycles because it feels like the same infrastructure that you need for bicycles is kind of the same infrastructure you would need for like electric scooters and like e-bikes and things like that. So yeah, I don't know, but that is a good caveat that I guess two-wheeled vehicles, but then I don't know, but then motorcycles is obviously not in that. So
I'm sure there's a code somewhere in the city.
Yeah, I think micro-mobility is like kind of the buzzword for it, but I feel like traditional bikes don't really count as micro-mobility. I feel like micro-mobility was made as like a buzzword to like get VCs to like invest in electric scooters or something like.
Yeah, it feels very first 21st century.
Yeah, exactly. So there's those three. We also have like a bus system within Folsom, so it's part of SACRT, which is like Sacramento Regional Transit, and so one of the I think the Folsom one is called the Folsom Stage Line, and so they have several routes that go across Folsom. I believe there's about like 3 or 4. So most of them kind of go in loops. So they'll be like one route going or one bus going counterclockwise and one going clockwise, for example, so that you don't have to like loop all the way back around just to get to one stop the other way. And then we also have the light rail. So we have 3 stops. We have and what I'll actually try to do is I'll try to edit this in post and put like a screen grab of like Google Maps or something, and maybe just like hover around where I'm talking about. So yeah, I'll try to provide visual aids where I can. But yeah, so the first thing is we have the Sutter Street station. So that's like kind of the heart of Folsom's downtown. Then we have the Glen station. So it's at the intersection of Glen and Folsom Boulevard. And then we have the Iron Point station, which is at the intersection of Iron Point and Folsom Boulevard. And then that goes basically all the way west to Sacramento, stopping at a variety of places. So yeah, those are all the different transit options that are available.
Okay, what data is currently available for how you utilize these different options are? Yeah,
so SACRT actually publishes quarterly and annual data on the ridership. I didn't actually write down the numbers themselves, but what I was actually looking for was what the ridership was for the Folsom Stage Line specifically. Because ideally, right, there'd be different things will get different utilization. Like maybe the light rail in downtown gets a lot of utilizations, in terms of ridership, but maybe the Folsom Stage Line doesn't. So I was just kind of curious what that breakdown was, but they don't seem to be that granular. But it seemed like on the order of like above 500,000 to like, a few million-ish per year.
And those are not unique riders. They're just like one person can count for multiple numbers there, right?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Okay. I'd be very surprised if we were getting 500,000.
Oh, yeah, that's true. Like Sacramento itself is only like 1 million people or something. Yeah. So yeah, exactly. I think a better metric I've seen is like rider mile. So it's like number of riders normalized to the number of miles.
Interesting.
Because it's like if one rider is going a very long way, then they're utilizing a lot more track miles of the actual infrastructure. And ideally, you want to like increase that number because you want kind of like the most utilization for the least amount of track space. Right? Like you want to be efficient with your rail infrastructure, ideally. Which I personally don't think Sacramento is, like mostly around land use, but we can get into that later.
How much would it cost to utilize the bus fare?
Yeah, so the Folsom Stage Line has a couple of different pricing things. So if you just want to buy like a one-way pass, and I believe there's like an app for it, or you know you can get like a ticket physically in some places. That would be I think $2.50 for like a one-way ticket, which is like quite expensive if you ask me.
Does it depend on distance?
No, so any distance. But I believe it's I actually don't know if it's a day pass or like a one-way pass.
Like you get off and you have to pay back again if you.
Yeah, I believe so. I believe so. I believe it's related to that ride specifically.
Okay.
So it's not like a day pass.
I think that's standard.
Yeah, that's pretty standard. There's also you can pay $100 a month for just like a month pass, so you can use it as many times a month as you want. And then if you're if you're a senior or disabled, and I believe senior counts as like 55 or older, you can get a bus pass for $50 a month.
Okay.
So yeah, that could be a great option if you're like, you know, a senior who is like retired in Folsom or something like that, and you don't want a car. Like, you know, $50 a month is pretty good.
So given all these different options and the metrics that you provided, what do you think are some of the problems that the city of Folsom has?
Yeah.
You know, any of them.
Yeah. So I mean, I guess my general issue is the car centricness in general. Like each new piece of infrastructure is geared around cars, and I don't think it's really sustainable in the long term. I don't even mean just from like an environmental perspective. I just mean like in terms of, you know, if you're like a business and you're in a very popular area, like that's just going to be the rate limiting thing as far as getting new customers and new business into your doors, right? Like if you're a restaurant and there's only so many parking spaces, that's exactly the amount of people that you can ever hope to have. And yeah, my suspicion is that the like restaurant capacity in an area, for example, is actually way more than the number of parking spots that are available, just because of like the ratio of like the size of a car to like the size of a restaurant, right?
Especially because I think in a place like Folsom, unless you're going out with your family, like if you're a teenager, or if you're someone who's maybe more in our age range, oftentimes is one person to a car.
Exactly. Yeah. Which is like incredibly wasteful. Yeah. I actually don't know what else I wrote down. Let's see.
How do you feel about the bus fare?
The bus fare. I feel like it's way too high. As someone who came from New York, I was like, okay, $2.75 to go anywhere in New York, like versus 25 cents less to get significantly less. That's like kind of crazy in my opinion.
For the monthly pass, what do you think makes sense in terms of how much should you be using the bus? Just, you know, subjectively to be able to justify saying, oh, I'm going to spend $100 per month on this.
Yeah, so I think you can kind of think about it as like if you're going to and from somewhere for 25 days out of the 30 to 31 days of the month. Because basically that would be like, you know, you would be paying like $2.50 each way. So it's like $5 per day. And then 25 days. Or sorry, so I guess 20 days. 20 days out of the 30. So, which kind of lines up, you know, it's like 4 weeks, right? So 5 working days a week. So basically, if you're like commuting somewhere, that's like roughly the break-even point.
Okay. So that's probably how they came up with that number then.
Yeah, and that's actually a pretty common thing. Like for example, in with like the New York City subway, if you have, I believe, 10 rides between Monday of 1 week and Sunday of like the end of that week, every ride after the 10th ride is automatically free.
Oh, nice.
So, that's like a more dynamic system because it's just like as long as you use the same card, it just kind of remembers that. So yeah, I imagine that was like the same calculus here. Although I don't know of anyone who uses the Folsom State Line to commute like to and from somewhere.
Have you even seen the bus? I feel like I haven't seen it.
I've seen it occasionally. Yeah, maybe like very, very infrequently. I feel like the service is definitely not regular enough to where I recognize it on the road, for example. And I think a lot of it is also for example, I believe like seniors can like dial a ride kind of thing. So it's almost like an on-demand service. But yeah.
Would you speculate that it has more to do with city investment in the bus transit or more on lack of interest for ridership?
That's a good question. I Yeah, that's a really good question. I would want to say a little bit of both naturally.
Mm-hmm.
However, I do think it's more due to the lack of interest, and I primarily think that's the case because Folsom gears itself as like a very affluent community,
Yeah.
and so I don't think anyone is, or I shouldn't say not anyone, but I think the median Folsom resident is probably not in enough like financial hardship to like not have a car or like not even consider a car.
Yeah.
So I think for a lot of people, they're thinking like, okay, well, if this is like the best transit option I have available, then like obviously I'm moving to do that. And that's not to say like cars like absolutely worse. I mean, like, you can buy like a used car and get like a very long life out of it, and it could just be like perfectly fine for your use case. And something enjoyable about driving a car too. So like I totally get it. So yeah, I would say maybe just because of the nature of like the median family in Folsom, and also actually that's a good point. You might actually have like a better perspective on this, but I imagine if you're a family, it's kind of hard to like use public transit. Like I even noticed this in like other cities like San Francisco or New York. Like it's very hard to be like a parent. It's like they don't make it easy for strollers, to go in and out. There's a lot of places where they don't have elevators for certain stations, so you're kind of like, okay, like I have to go down the stairs, and that's fine if you're like one person and you're like walking and commuting and stuff like that. But it's kind of hard if you're a parent and you're like carrying someone or have a stroller and things like that. So, do you think that maybe the kind of family centric nature of Folsom lends itself also to being car centric?
Yeah, I do think that you raised a lot of good points there. Having a stroller, especially if you're going out to like buy groceries or something, doesn't really lend itself to being like feasible to be able to like have a child, a stroller, all your groceries, and be able to like do that consistently. Especially considering when you look at the map of where the different routes are, they're very much focused on connecting the different forms of transit with businesses. So, for example, like there's a fair bit around the different light rail stations and through the different business areas of the city. But I mean, living in a residential area, like there's not really, I couldn't tell you where the nearest bus stop is to me. Probably I'd have to go over to the Pladio, which at that point it's like, well, I can't really walk there.
Yeah.
I needed a car anyways, and so why would I drive to go then get on a bus?
Yeah, exactly.
So I would say it's kind of a chicken and egg thing here, where it's like, yes, there's probably not a lot of people who are interested in using the transit, but then also the way that the transit is invested in at the city level and the way it's functioning at the moment, it's not really feasible for me to even use if I wanted to.
I see what you're saying. Yeah, I that kind of makes sense. It's like yeah, it's a really good point. So yeah, I definitely think I guess one of my issues I have personally is like when I look at the map, I feel like a lot of the bus stops are placed at kind of inopportune places. They're often placed, I mean, for good reason, they're placed near like arterial roads. But I also feel like maybe just slowing the bus route down a bit and going like slightly further into residential areas would actually be a much better experience for riders. Because then they're kind of like less stressed, like getting on and off the bus. Like, you have to worry less about like cars, I don't know, honking at you or something like that, or like trying to speed around you and stuff.
So like we were looking at a map earlier where basically it was on one of the Blue Ravine stops, which is right next to a residential neighborhood, which has a road running parallel to Blue Ravine where the stop is. And the bus stop is on the Blue Ravine side, so it's at this major thoroughfare, and you got the two aspects of, there's a lot of traffic going through, so you're having effects on traffic by having the bus stop there, but then there's also the safety aspect for the people who are commuting. So it seemed like it would have been maybe perhaps more prudent, if not, affecting slightly the rider time, to put it just on the other side of the road there.
Yeah.
But I mean, given the way that the city of Folsom is also very resident focused in the way that planning tends to happen, especially given some of the conversations we've been having with city council meetings the past few weeks. Do you think that part of that could be as a response to city residents feeling inconvenienced by a bus stop being right next to their house?
I suspect that's probably the case. But I would say like even aside from that, I feel like there's a lot of like redundant bus stops. So for example, like you'll see like two bus stops on the same street, pretty close together, but like the main way to get out of like a residential neighborhood would be through like an intersection closest to only one of those bus stops. Or sometimes like the bus stops would be close enough to where like the distance between the stops is like kind of walkable. So it kind of begs the question of like, okay, like who's taking it one stop, which is kind of a good thing to consider sometimes. It's like, okay, you know, who you want people to at least consider taking the bus, you know, 1 or 2 stops, for it to be feasible. If it's like completely useless at, you know, at any one stop, then it kind of doesn't make sense to have some of those stops, and I feel like that would just improve the overall like latency of the ride and things like that. But then again, you know, a lot of this is speculative, and I would appreciate more data from SAC-RT about how Folsom Stage Line specifically performs. I mean, that's the thing. I'm like very skeptical about like what the ridership even is. I wouldn't be surprised if it's in like the, you know, hundreds to only like a few thousand people like per year or something. Because that's kind of what it feels like to me. I mean, I could be wrong, but yeah.
Okay. Well, we definitely talked a lot about the bus infrastructure in Folsom. One of the other highlights of the city is its biking infrastructure. What are your thoughts on the bike infrastructure?
Yeah, I on one hand, I feel like a lot of the trails are very, very good in that they completely avoid like the arterial roads, and so it feels a lot safer and a lot nicer to bike along them. I guess my main critique is like they're often kind of unnecessarily windy, so they're not like geared towards efficient transit in the same way that, you know, roads are kind of built to get you like from point A to point B in like a convenient way. And there are a lot of bike lanes throughout Folsom, so like I have to give credit where credit is due. However, there aren't a lot of like protected bike lanes, and generally like biking in one of those bike lanes feels very unsafe. There's a lot of roads where, you know, the speed limit is like 45 miles per hour, but people are driving like 50, 55 miles per hour. And, you know, if like someone even clips you, like when they're going that fast, it's like, that's seriously scary. And it's not something like anyone would consider like sending their kids on or something like that. So yeah, I don't know. I feel like there were a couple other points I might have like listed down, but I'm not sure.
How do you think accessibility is for people that are using the bike trails to like do their grocery shopping or like go to businesses?
That's a good point. I think there's some areas that are like very well connected. So for example, like there's a bike trail nearby that goes all the way to like a local grocery store called like Rayleigh's. And it's really nice because a lot of the like basically it goes right behind the kind of like commercial complex basically, and so you can kind of ride up to the trail, like park your bike, and then go do whatever you want, come back, and then, you know, bike back to your residential area. I guess my main critique is like that's more the outlier than the norm. Typically, it's not very well connected to a lot of business areas, and I wish there was more of that. I also wish like the bicycle parking was much more integrated. And it just seems like there's way fewer places to like lock or park your bike. And again, maybe that's like a chicken and egg situation kind of thing. It's like the more people went, then they would like install more. But I mean, it seems like a pretty trivial cost. It's just like a big metal arc thing that like, you know, like you're already pouring the concrete. So it's like, you know, what's the difference between ordering like 3 versus 10 of those, you know, arch things or whatever? I mean, maybe they're like a few $100s each or something like that. But like, you know, if you let the concrete set and then you like put it in later, I mean, that's like way more work.
Well, I mean, I would imagine that's also a business incentive.
Yeah.
Like, for example, if someone, like, say, a group of teenagers, they're biking during a summer day, and they drive up near, like, a yogurt shop, and there's nowhere to really park their bikes, are they going to be motivated to stay there as much?
Yeah, they might just like go home, right? Or they might just be like, oh, like, whatever, let's just, like, you know, go, like, order, like, Uber Eats or something.
Yeah.
And then, like, someone else, like, delivers it, which is, like, kind of wasteful. Like, you could just go there yourself pretty conveniently.
Which I will say, I think it's uncontroversial to say that most people use the bike trails for recreation rather than for like commuting or doing grocery shopping. But, I do think it's still like there's that element of even if you're using it just for fun, like you're not opposed to necessarily stopping by somewhere and having a treat.
Yeah, and there's also like I forget like exactly what principle it is, but sometimes when you build for accessibility, it just has all these like unintended byproducts that people just like for different reasons. So for example, like you know, like at crosswalks, when like the sidewalk sort of becomes like flush with the ground, it's mainly meant for like people in like wheelchairs and stuff like that. But it's actually like really convenient if you're like rolling something, like if you have like a suitcase or something and you're like rolling it, like you don't want to like pick it up and then like put it on the curb and stuff like that.
A stroller.
Exactly, yeah, like a stroller, like, you know, so like the parents don't have to be disabled, like the kid isn't disabled, but it's like still way more convenient to do that than to like pick up your stroller and then put it down. So I feel like investing in bike trails would be a similar sort of thing of like, okay, well, it doesn't, as long as it doesn't affect the recreational aspect and people are getting more use out of the same infrastructure, and the longevity of trails can be much, much larger because, the kind of weight that's going on that paved area is like way less than a car. So, I mean, they're going to outlast the roads by like several fold. So if you can make more use out of that, like, why not?
Yeah. So the bike infrastructure in the city of Folsom has a huge footprint.
Yeah.
But one form of transit that really doesn't is the light rail system. So what are your thoughts on the light rail system in Folsom?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I love light rails, and I think Sacramento's is actually one of the better ones in terms of like cost efficiency to build. I want to say it was around like 20 million per track mile or something. I might make a correction on that like next week, but I distinctly remember this number because I was looking up how much Seattle's new light rail system cost, and I think it averaged over like $100 million per mile.
Wow.
Because there's some like really complicated like tunneling and stuff. I mean, granted, I feel like they did a good job and they made the main line like in a pretty opportune place. Like, first of all, they went from the airport to the city, which is just like, it's like such an obvious thing that Sacramento still hasn't done, and it like bugs the heck out of me.
Our airport is so disconnected from everything.
Yeah, like seriously. I mean, which is fine. Like the airport maybe should be like way outside the city limits, but it's like you should have like some sort of transit that doesn't involve like needing a car to get there, because that's just like wasteful. And also, it's like you're flying. Like, obviously, you don't need the car when you're there. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, and it's not like there's any like dearth of land. Like if you're driving to the airport, there's like nothing but like flat, empty land, like going to the airport.
Which to an extent is good because you don't want to be having that noise pollution over people living right next to an airport. But you could totally use it for transit.
Exactly. Yeah. It's like, yeah. I mean, it's like the most opportune thing. And so I'm glad that the light rail goes to Folsom. I actually did use the light rail like pretty regularly for like a long time. So during like COVID, I had an internship at the California DMV, and it was right off of, it was like maybe like a 3/4 mile walk from the 26th Street station in like downtown Sacramento. So basically, I would take it all the way from Folsom Boulevard and Iron Point all the way to like downtown Sacramento. It was really nice because I was also like taking some classes at community college, and so I actually got like my student like transit pass thing for free, or like a very subsidized. It was like $20 or something for like per month, or like per like semester or something even. And so I personally really enjoyed it. My one big issue though with it is like I feel like the land use around the train stations is really, really bad. And so what do I mean by that? Basically, when you're designing something like a rail system, which is like very fixed, you want to utilize the space around each stop very effectively. Meaning, you want the things around a train stop to be, things like businesses and or like businesses that sort of consumers would use, maybe not like corporate offices and things like that. You would also want like more dense housing, right? Because like the people nearest, like ideally, if you don't want a car, you want to be living as close to the transit options as possible. And I think Folsom does a pretty bad job at this. I would say the Central Street one is actually like pretty good in terms of like having like a mix of businesses and things like that. And there are some like loft apartments, which is like very new for Folsom, like it, which has had practically no like mixed use zoning in its history. I think that's one of the first examples of mixed use zoning. So it's definitely like I hesitate to put on the right track, but like directionally a bit better. I feel like the Glen Street station is like the most egregious example because it's literally right next to this like enormous parking lot for this like enormous like corporate building, and it's very underutilized, like especially post COVID. And I just feel like that's just a huge like waste of land effectively. Like if you could build a bunch of like residential areas there, for example, and even like maybe some businesses or something, like just that corridor between Glen and Sutter Street would be like insanely valuable and like just really cool even. Like there's tons of outdoor activities to do like near the river and the lake, and then if you like just go back home like not that far away and still have like a bunch of stuff to do. I don't know, I just feel like that would be really cool. And then the same thing kind of goes with like Folsom Boulevard and Iron Point. There are like some homes nearby, but they're all like single family homes, and I would say it's like at least a probably 10-15 minute walk from any of those residential areas to the train station. So
At least there's the outdoor mall there. I feel like that's
Yeah.
more than Glen has.
That's true. Yeah, there's definitely more than Glen has. Yeah, I would say that the like ranking wise, it probably goes like Sutter, Iron Point, and then Glen in terms of just like like a land use around the train station. Yeah, so I don't know. That's kind of my big issue. And to be fair, that is an issue just with SAC-RT in general. So even though it was like pretty efficient in terms of like track mile, per track mile that was built, I just feel like the land use could be so much better, and I think it would really turn it from like a kind of mediocre train service to like a really excellent one, personally. It's also like an issue in California in general. Like, if you ever gone near BART, like some of the BART stations are like right in the middle of like highways and things, and they build like these expensive like tunnels to kind of like go under the highway and like onto the like main streets and things like that. And there's some areas like Berryessa in the Bay Area that are like doing a pretty good job, but most are just like atrociously bad when it comes to land use. Like, it'll be like industrial parks or just like parking lots and things, which is just like terrible in my opinion.
So you've identified a bunch of problems
Yes.
that the city of Folsom has with different forms of infrastructure.
Yeah.
But one of the things that we try to do on this podcast is offer some constructive criticism and potential solutions.
Yeah.
So I know you've thought about several solutions for some of these problems. Could you share some of them?
Yeah, sure. Do you actually mind if I?
Yeah, sure.
I made them like actually quite hyper specific.
Okay.
And again, I'll try to add. I'll try to do my best. I mean, this also kind of like is based on the quality of my editing skills and things like that. I'll try to like add extra footage and stuff of where this is useful, or at the very least, I'll put like a screenshot or something and maybe like point some arrows and things like that.
And that's only for the people who are going to be like able to see the screen, because if you're listening to this in your car, then you're SOL here.
Yeah, that is a good point. Yeah, like don't feel obligated. And also, and that's also kind of a motivation for me, like not to do this. But
accessibility, Darvesh.
That's true. That's a good point. Yeah, like multiple modalities. Also, like I feel like it helps maybe like the re-listenability or the rewatchability.
Which hats off to you if you're listening to this more than once.
Yeah. Seriously. But yeah, anyway. So like specific solutions I have. So there's actually this like really good protected two-way bike lane, kind of from between like two inlets to residential areas. So it's on a main road called Blue Ravine, which kind of runs. Would that be east-west?
It meanders a little bit.
Yeah, it kind of meanders, but like generally, I feel like it runs like east-west. And so there's basically these like kind of reflective like plastic poles between the rightmost driving lane and the kind of start of the bike lane, and there's a bit of a buffer that's like painted in kind of these like stripes of white to separate the actual bike lane, and then the bike lane itself is two ways. So there's basically like a dashed yellow line that separates the kind of bike traffic going both ways.
So it almost looks like a road smaller right next to a road separated.
Yeah, kind of
buffer.
Yeah, or like if you've ever been on like kind of like a recreational trail, it basically looks like that, but instead of like paving a separate path, imagine you just like painted that onto the ground with some like extra buffer for the separation of cars and bike lane. So basically that already exists, but it's in a very, very small corridor, and it doesn't actually connect really like anything. And I'm actually not sure why they made it, to be perfectly honest, because the two streets that it goes between are also connected internally via like residential roads. So arguably it's like even better to just use the internal like residential roads to commute. However, I propose that we extend it from a place called like Aerosmith Drive. So there's like Blue Ravine and Aerosmith Drive. And we extend that all the way to Folsom Middle School, because I think extending biking infrastructure to a middle school would actually be a very kind of quantifiable challenge, and we could like very much measure the results. We can measure like, okay, how many parents come to drop off their kids at school? How many bikes do we actually see parked? Like, do we actually need to install new places for kids to park their bike? Like, is the demand actually, exceeding whatever capacity is there? Would be a good problem in the short term, obviously not the long term, because if you want people to have places to park their bikes. And so, and I think there's definitely the space. So Blue Ravine has like a pretty wide rightmost lane, and there's also a lot of like dedicated right turn lanes, which are very underutilized because not a ton of people are turning right into that neighborhood. there are also a lot of like merging lanes that are intended for people turning right onto Blue Ravine, which is like the main road. And so I personally feel like a lot of that could be repurposed into a bike lane, and I think it would give parents a lot more confidence, like sending their kids biking wise to school. And I think if something is like safe enough that parents recommend to their kids, it's generally could be a good sign that this is safe for a variety of people of a variety of different abilities and things like that. So like hyper specific, hyper granular, but I picked it because first of all it makes like the kids more independent, the kids and the parents. Like now the parents like their schedule is a bit more free during the day, and also the kids are like a bit more free. If they want to stay for like after school programs and things like that. So in general, I think it improves the quality of life for both parties involved, and I think it's relatively little in the way of actual cost. Right? I mean, this is just like painting and stuff like that. You're not actually like adding any, like you're not like repaving the road. You're not like extending the sidewalk or anything. It's literally just an aesthetic difference that is meant to be more protective for bicyclists.
Well, Folsom is really concerned about safety. That's something that I feel like we've been hearing a lot at the different city council meetings. It's something that is a draw for a lot of families to come to Folsom, and this is very much in that vein.
Yeah, definitely. The other small thing is like I wish a lot of the bike lanes were painted more like kind of fluorescent green. I'm sure you guys might have seen this if you commuted, even around. I mean, pretty much like any major city now. But it's kind of this like mossy green sort of color, and at night it's like a bit reflective, so like the headlights kind of reflect off of it. So I think that would be a welcome addition. And again, it's like totally aesthetic, but improves the quality of life for both the drivers and the bicyclists in terms of just communicating like, okay, this lane is for bicycles, this lane is for cars. I think a way to achieve this like good separation would be to have like low-lying, removable kind of concrete barriers between the bike lanes and the actual cars. And this would be nice because it's very low cost. You're not actually installing any sort of like permanent fixture, but it's also like heavy enough that it's not going to get like blown away by weather, and it's also like enough of a deterrent for cars because you don't want to like ride up onto there's almost like a tactile feel to it if you're kind of veering too far in one direction.
What do you envision? Like, how would these barriers look?
So they would basically be maybe like, I don't know, 3-4 inches off the ground. They're kind of like a trapezoid sort of shape, and they come in these like long, sort of slender chunks.
So almost like those taller ones that you see on the side of construction projects on the freeway. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. So imagine that, but like way shallower. And they
but
can
more than like a parking spot, like bumper.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. More than like just a fluorescent like plastic thing. This would actually be like hard and again like have sort of a tactile feel to it. So and there's obviously like a spectrum here. Like paint would obviously be like the cheapest. These removable concrete barriers would be kind of another notch on that spectrum. And I also think that the nice thing about maybe the concrete barriers that's different from the paint is that these are very reversible decisions. So I think this could be very enticing for the planning commission, for example, where you say like, hey, right, like why don't we just test these barriers out? We measure these couple of metrics that we're going to use to track the success or failure of this project. And if at the end of, I don't know, 2 years or something, this fails, then sure, whatever, like we'll just like take the concrete barriers and like put them somewhere else or like remove them or something. And the area goes back exactly to what it was before, and there's no actual change, and no one needs to like get upset. So yeah, I personally like those. They've I think areas around Vancouver have been experimenting with this. Basically, instead of going through this like very lengthy kind of planning commission process, they actually just do more like iterative experimentation.
Oh, interesting.
So they basically like just try it out in an area and then gather feedback from like residents and things like that. And if it doesn't work, they're just like, okay, we'll just take it out. And if it does work, then they install more like permanent fixtures. I'll go through some of these other ones a bit more quickly. I just think there should be more signage for a lot of the trails. For example, it's like very easy to get confused like where you're going and like where the thing you're looking for is. Again, I mean, this might be because it's more geared towards recreation. However, I think even like small maps could help as far as like recreation, in terms of like just orienting you where you are.
Especially like those ones that you could just like see on the side of the road.
Yeah, exactly. Or even like just maybe arrows to like common places. So for example, like Rayleigh's, like the grocery store, just having some signage that says like continue this way if you want to get to Rayleigh's or something like that. And again, like people have phones and things like that, but I just think some signage would be nice.
I would add to that, I think lighting would also be good,
Yes.
especially during the portions, like, for example, I think of between the prison and where we currently are.
Mhm.
So between there and Blue Ravine, near the dam road, there's hardly any lighting. So even if, for example, you're not there at night, there's some argument to be made there that it does improve safety.
Yeah.
I think research has shown that. I was doing a little bit of research for the show where there are some studies that show it does increase safety in the city. And, for anyone who's using those roads, even like dawn or dusk, for example, if that's the only time you can exercise because you're busy during the workday, I think it's a low-cost investment for a city to make to have such a good tangible improvement.
Yeah, and actually, I think that could be like a great opportunity for like solar lighting or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Like imagine you like kind of buried the battery in the ground, so it's like a bit insulated.
Yeah.
And then it just like charged kind of during the day, and then at night it's like because you want it at like human height roughly anyway.
Mm-hmm.
So like you don't need to make this like really really tall structure anyways.
Yeah.
So yeah, that'll be awesome. Plus like you're bringing this point up like right for the podcast, but the summer nights here are actually like really nice.
Oh yeah, they're the best time to be out.
Yeah, so like a lot of people they'll either like kind of get their daily activity really early in the day or like really late at night. So I think even for that like it could just be fun recreationally, just to like I don't know go for a bike ride at like midnight or something.
Well, especially like it was during one of those heat waves that Folsom gets, and it's like 110 degrees out. It's a little bit safer to be going out when it's like 80 in the evening than when it's so hot during the day.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's a great point. The other thing is, I think I would just like wider sidewalks in general. It's just like very awkward for like two people to walk past each other in like different directions, or even just walk side by side. So yeah, I would generally like more mixed use zoning to encourage like walkable neighborhoods. I think the best candidates for this in terms of like just starting fresh and making like a really nice walkable neighborhood. Actually, if you guys are interested in this, you should check out this company called Cul-de-sac. They're building like a walkable community in Tempe, Arizona, and it's very like European. I'll try to add a screenshot around here of what it looks like, but it's very like I don't know, like Italian countryside, not countryside, but like I don't know, yeah, like small Italian city kind of thing.
You're giving yourself a lot of homework for posts.
I know, right? Yeah, seriously, I shouldn't be committing myself to this, but anyway, for the pod. Let's see. Oh yeah, I think this project is actually underway, but I think I would like to see some passing lanes for the light rail. Currently, the frequency within Folsom, and like specifically Folsom, is every 30 minutes, whereas the frequency everywhere else in the light rail is every 15 minutes, which I think is like personally much more reasonable for like a train system. And and the reason for that is that there's only one track going in the Folsom area. So basically, like the train has to go like all the way down to Sutter Street, which is like the furthest stop and the last one, and then it has to go like all the way back. So there can't be like two trains running kind of asynchronously. But this project is already underway, so hopefully it should be done in the next few years and contribute to better frequency. Yeah, I would just rezone the area near Glen Station for mixed-use development. I would highly recommend like 5x1 structures. So this is typically like the first floor is like foundation up to the first floor is like concrete, and then the rest of the structure is wood.
Is that for resident?
So it's a mixed use. So the first floor is typically like businesses.
Okay.
So like.
Oh, gotcha. So like downtown.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Yeah, and I think this was like a recent innovation because of like a lot of kind of like lumber technologies have progressed. And also the state of California, I believe, allowed like taller wood-based developments. Because I think the fear earlier was like, okay, is it strong enough for earthquakes? Is it like, is it going to catch on fire or things like that? Or is it going to be structurally sound enough to support all that weight, like plumbing and all this kind of stuff? And yeah, because of this, like a lot of these 5x1s have popped up, and some variation of that too. Like you might only have, one and then like 3 stories of residential.
Which I would imagine, say like Folsom is probably more likely.
Yeah. I think even 3 stories, because even if you look at like the densification from a single family home to like even just like 2 or 3 stories, it's like enormous. It's like actually kind of crazy. I would like more granular data also for wait times for the Folsom stage line. I don't know, just I'm kind of curious, like how long is the average person waiting? Is that like a reason that maybe people don't ride as much? Like maybe they try it for the first time, they wait like a long time, and they're like, I'm not going to do this. And then I would like more data for the average ride distance, right? So like, are most people going within Folsom? Are most people using it to commute to the light rail to then go somewhere else? Because that would be kind of like useful data. Like maybe we should just have like an express line or something like, to the light rail station. So yeah, just I don't know, more data. I mean, obviously the data science person isn't going to tell you otherwise.
Yeah.
So But yeah, those are all the suggestions I kind of have.
Okay, well, thank you for sharing all your different thoughts for this episode. Hopefully this was informative to our viewers, and please let us know what your opinions are on transit as well as what you prefer to use personally.
Yeah. All right. See you guys next time.
Thanks.